On today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the Engineering Insights Report, which is published annually by EETech. And this report has some interesting findings that compare Gen Xers and Boomers and how they make decisions to those millennials and Gen Zers. And one of the big findings is that the younger engineers are not only specifiers that'll help shortlist your company, but they're also, in the case of millennials, some of them have been in the workforce over 20 years and are absolutely in decision-making seats as well. So for all of those reasons, this episode will help inform your 2026 plan and think about where you might want to invest more and pivot away from certain activities in order to reach those digital native buyers. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by two-time guest, Terra Gledhill from EETech. She's the Director of Research and Marketing. Welcome back, Terra.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I think this is the perfect time of year for us to talk because today we're going to be focused on your research, which is so informative when people look to creating their marketing plans on how to reach engineers and technical buyers. So great to have you. Glad we were able to fit this in over the holidays to get this information out to people during that planning process. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So Terra, since last we talked, I'm trying to think of when it's been a while. What's going on over at EETech? What have you guys been up to?
Oh, lots of stuff. EETech is expanding pretty rapidly, doing some acquisitions and kind of trying to expand our portfolio. We acquired a company called breadboard.com. They do some really great stuff with AI integrated into just like BOM management, procurement, just helping people in that area work a lot faster. We just announced our acquisition of datasheets.com. So really, expanding the portfolio, just trying to help from every angle when it comes to the industry. So
Nice.
Lots of good stuff going on.
That's exciting. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'll be watching closely as you guys and bring all of these new capabilities into the fold and learn more. But today we're going to be talking about your Engineering Insights Report, or the EIR. And how many years are you in on this research now?
This is our 9th year now. Yeah. So it's a pretty big thing. It started, before I joined EETech. I joined 5 years ago, and our old editor-in-chief, kind of when she exited, said, this is my baby, please don't let it die. So I've really had it as a passion project for the past 5 years and really tried to expand on it. And, our team wants so much information. We want to ask millions of questions. Engineers don't want to ask millions of questions. So there's this balance of trying to get to the heart of what people want to know and what they're willing to share. It's really about the response rate for us. I mean, we had over 3,000 people this year, and that's across all the personas. So students, makers, educators, electrical engineers, control and automation engineers. So we've got a really big sample size, which just gives us a lot of confidence in the data.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful sample size. And I love how you guys have those different segments. I was just looking at the research online and seeing how easy it was to talk back and forth and say, let's just look at control and automation. Let's just look at
Yeah, I love hearing that.
Yeah. For people unfamiliar with this research, what does it focus on?
It is mostly focused on the engineers and the challenges they face, the type of content they rely on and want to see more of. There's a little bit of who they prefer when it comes to distributors and suppliers, the kind of tools that they're looking for on websites, and just really what helps them engineer the future pretty much.
Okay. And when you break down this report, I know, we've talked to you have some industry focuses, but I understand that a lot of what you dive into as well as the differences in age.
Yes. So age plus experience level. We started I don't even know how long ago we started it. We were looking at career pros versus next gen. And next gen was an engineer that had 5 or less years of experience. And so that was great. We were trying to look at where the industry is going. But then about a year or two ago, Steve Cholis, many people may know him, the man, the myth, the mustache, basically started beating the drum of, you guys, it's so much more than just that 1 to 5 years. It is those millennials. They have much more experience. They're not brand new, but they are where we're going next. Mm-hmm. And I even remember back 2 years ago at IMS, you guys had a panel talking about how millennials are really taking over the workforce as the more seasoned pros kind of retire out. And then even Deloitte came out and said by 2030, 74% of the workforce will be millennial and Gen Z. So I definitely had to concede to Trollus and be like, all right, you were right. We need to focus on this. But then even looking at, I was like, well, I'm a millennial and I've been, in my professional career for 20 years. So we had to go and look at how age matches up with experience. And we're now seeing, so it's anyone who has 22 or less years of experience is that millennial or Gen Z.
Wow. So that definitely is a mindset change of how I think boomers and Xers maybe view millennials as young, but no, experience, workforce, making purchase decisions. Yeah. But also digital natives, more or less. Would you say that of yourself, Terra, as an older millennial?
Yes, as an older millennial, yes. We grew up with technology all around us. I look at, there are kids now who are 10 years old that have cell phones. And I was like, I didn't get one until I was 16, but still 16, I had a cell phone and, a laptop and this sort of stuff. So we're just so ingrained in that technology now.
Yeah. Well, let's unpack some of the key findings. Where would you like to start? What do you think would be relevant to our audience? Again, in the mindset of we're putting together our marketing plans for 2026, our strategies. What do you think?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we have to start with AI. And I know that it's kind of like, I feel like 2 years ago, everyone was like, it was digital transformation. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, if I read one more blog or one more webinar about digital transformation, I'm going to scream. So I feel like people are kind of starting to feel that way about AI, but at the same time, it's so prevalent in everything that we do. It's something that we have to talk about. And I do think it's something, I don't think it's a bubble. I think it's here to stay. So looking at the research, there's kind of 5 just interesting points that I wanted to talk about. But first we've got to talk about is AI. So we like to ask, how they're using AI or the AI adoption. And looking back at 2024, we saw that 45% of the millennial and Gen Z engineers were using it in their just kind of at any point in their workflow, comparing that to only 20% of career pros. So we've got almost half of millennial Z using it last year and not even a quarter of career pros using it. Now we jump into 2025, that has grown so much. We've got 64% of millennial Zs using it in their workflows and 46% of career pros. So those career pros went from not even a quarter to almost half. Yeah. And if we look at, if that was to stay the same over the next 10 years, that 20 to 25% adoption rate, you have to think that in 2 years, basically 100% of engineers, no matter their age or experience level, will be using AI. The one thing that I find really interesting, though, is we actually analyze the sentiments. So we let them finish a sentence. We said, finish the sentence. The use of AI in design engineering will ... And we let them finish that sentence. And the sentiments are just so different between them. 70% of millennial Zs see AI as positive. They think it's going to be an accelerator. It's going to make their jobs easier. It's going to make them produce faster. They're like fully on board. But we compare that to only 40% of career pros really have a positive outlook on it. They're so much more skeptical. One person even wrote in, it has to be regulated and secure. I don't want to think about my intelligent toaster conspiring with my dishwasher. They're just so much more skeptical about it, but it's being adopted pretty rapidly.
That is a rapid growth year over year, and not surprising, but that sentiment difference is for sure remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you, so just curious because we asked some questions too, and I struggled with, do I call this large language model? Do I say generative search? Like, how did you define what you meant by AI, or what words did you use?
Yeah, well, we made that mistake 2 years ago where we just said AI. And so people are like, well, but wait, what AI? I was like, oh
Yeah.
gosh,
Yeah.
we need to change that this year. So we did change it this year to LLMs,
Okay.
and then as an answer option, and then gave them some other ones. There's machine learning, there's code generation, there's image generation. So we made sure to try to list out everything that AI encompasses.
Which is a harder and harder task to figure out, right?
And
Oh,
it even went into like sources of information because last year, it was like, is it search engines? Is it AI? It's like, well, okay, these things are starting to mesh now.
yeah.
So yeah, even had to look at the sources of information. It's where we've seen, I think, the most change year over year. So 3 years ago, I guess 2 years ago, in 2023, because our report is, it's 2025, we release it in 2026. So we ask, what are the sources of information that you rely on during your design process? And the top three have never changed, but what becomes the number one changes. So in 2023, it was search engines. And you think about it, there's so many options out there. And they're like, oh my gosh, Leah, there's all of these things. So they were going to search engines. And then in 2024, we've got this rise of AI. It became the manufacturer's website. They want to go straight to the real source. There's so much information out there. There's so much fake or AI or all of that. They want straight to the source. What was interesting this year, though, is the number one source, if you combine career pros and millennial Gen Z, is communities and forums. They now are, so used to search engines and these AI answers. They now want to just talk to real people. They want peer validation. They want real answers. So that was, I think, the biggest shift that we saw in the report this year. But when you break it down to career pro and millennial Z, what I still find interesting is that for career pros, their number one source is the manufacturer website. They are not as involved in the communities and forums as the younger engineers are. So yeah, they are still really relying on that real information, whether it's on the website or in the communities. But the millennials and Gen Z is definitely more for communities and forums.
Oh, what an interesting difference. Because as you were going through that and talking about the holistic results, I was thinking about how a few years ago, Google started surfacing community links higher, right? Reddit all of a sudden just exploded and all that. And I thought, I wonder if this is just, a result of that. But obviously, if there's still this difference between generations, then it's real. And it's hard to imagine that people find the time to post on these community forums. I know as a marketer, it makes sense. It's, you want this to be authentic, but it's also, it feels so daunting, to have an authentic presence on these community sites with technical people talking to technical people.
Yeah. And sometimes as marketers, we're not the most technical people. We understand it, but, and I tried with Reddit. I was like, okay, I can't be too markety here. This is real people. And so someone would say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'd be like, here's an article from us that might help you. I'm not trying to sell you. But then you get into like the forums for, all about circuits and stuff, and just the stuff that they are talking about, is so far above my head, but you can still see the challenges. You can still see what they're trying to figure out. And I think that's one of the reasons why, some of the content we produce is like trying to answer those real world problems that we see them talking about in the communities.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up podcast. Did you guys ask any specific podcast questions?
We did not ask any I think in kind of like the desired content, are they going to podcasts for it?
Yeah.
I feel like for us, it's a lot more, I don't want to say entertainment. We try to stay on our podcast, like 20% technical and 80% technical, 20% conversational.
Yeah.
So, there's a real balance there.
Yeah. And All About Circuits, that podcast has been going for a while now too.
Yeah. I think since 2020, I think we're about to hit our 100th episode.
Great. That's the same year I started this podcast. So
Yeah, it really helped the podcast community.
Yeah. Okay. So what else? We talked about AI. What's next?
Yeah. So we've talked about kind of the sources of content they rely on.
That's right.
We also ask, what do you want to see more of? That's kind of how the EIR started, is our editorial team being like, we think we're doing a good job, but why don't you guys tell us what you want us to write about and what you want us to cover? So we definitely ask about the desired content, what they want to see more of. And so this is one where it's still very similar between the groups. They both want very in-depth technical articles. They want practical builds. But what I think the biggest difference that I saw there was millennial Gen Z. They really want interactive. They want workshops. They want interactive forums. They want webinars. So I think the takeaway here is both of them really want this real technical depth and not the marketing fluff, which I think is sometimes hard for us. We want to tell them, like, here's all the features of this amazing thing. Here's how it's different from everybody else. But what the engineers really want is, tell me the problem that it solves, because they face so many problems. And that kind of brings me to my next point, just the challenges they face. So we ask them, what are the challenges that you're struggling with as an engineer? And the top two are always the same for both groups. It is staying on schedule and staying on budget. But where they differ is that third spot. So the career pros say that keeping up with the latest technology is their third big struggle. But for the millennial Z, it's that the engineering staff lacks the needed skills. And so I found this really, really interesting. And I was like, okay, so, I see the data, I see what you're telling me, but why? Why do they have such a difference when it comes to this third spot? So I kind of had to break it down a little bit and realize that. So the career pros say that their biggest struggle is keeping up with this rapid pace of technology. And that totally makes sense. You have to think that they've lived through this like massive expansion of there's tool chains, machine learning, AI, cloud integration, cybersecurity, all of this stuff that they have seen change over time. It's not just analog design or anything like that. But there's also this added layer where they're like often responsible for being that final decision maker. They're, kind of at the top. They have to make that final decision. There's so much going on around them. So they kind of feel like it's all on their shoulders. But then you look at millennial and Gen Z, and they're not limited by we're not limited by technology because we've grown up with it. It's been around us all the time. So that challenge that they're saying that the team around them is lacking those skills, just needed to move quickly. They're struggling with so they're inheriting these like legacy systems, outdated documentation or processes, there's skills gaps, there's workforce shortages. So they're actually relying very heavily on company documentation and their colleagues because they don't have that experience of like a seasoned pro. Yeah. And I think kind of a takeaway here, one, it's at an organization level. Organizations, need to be making sure that people are upskilling, that the career pros are kind of passing on that tacit knowledge. I really think the mentor-mentee relationship is really important. But I do think there's a unique opportunity for both of these groups to kind of learn from each other. And this will kind of tie into one of my key takeaways at the end. But, I think as marketers, a lot of us are really aiming for that decision maker. But my suggestion is aim for the future decision maker.
Yes, yes. And this, what I consider the specifier, because to me, that younger specifier is the first person that goes out and does the legwork and finds options and presents it to the buying team. And then they become the future decision maker. So you get like a twofer, right?
That's totally one of my key takeaways. So,
yeah,
yes.
Love that. Love that. Another thing that stood out to me is when you talked about obsolescence and needing to modernize whatever it is, whether it's a test system on the manufacturing line or whatever that product is, and the hesitancy of digital natives. They don't want to call a salesperson. They don't want to talk it through. Even if that salesperson's technical, they're way more likely to stay online, right? And go through that purchase or now use their large language model. So if we as marketers continue to have that documentation for products, even after their end of life, that helps them, we can help them find that new product and overcome that. And they're all going to go to their ChatGPT or their Gemini or their Claude or whatever and try to find that documentation and those recommendations. So you just connected a couple dots for me. That sounds like a pretty good content campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your study last year, is it 60% or 80% of that buyer journey is done online? correct?
Yeah, it's 65%, but for the younger crowd, it's above 70.
I was
So
going to say, yeah, I would assume for them, because I mean, I think about the way that we, or me, just buying products. I saw an ad on Instagram, then I went to the website, I did some research, and then I'll go to, some sort of like Reddit to be like, okay, tell me about the real use of this. Did you really see, results or like it or that sort of thing?
yes.
So, I mean, I do so much research before I even buy like a $20 product. So I think, I mean, when it comes to what engineers are doing, it's not a face cream. It is like a component that is going into this larger thing that is, going to be used by masses. So it's so important to have, I don't want to say the digital presence, but the digital presence, the website, the tools. And again, there's another difference that we see between the career pros and the millennials, just on the information that they're looking for, the tools that they're looking for on websites. So we app notes and reference designs are, always like number one and number two when we're asking them, like, the digital design tools that you rely on, and what do you really need out of a manufacturer distributor's websites? Like, what do you need? So app notes and reference designs are always at the top, but what we're seeing more and more each year is this need for CAD models, PCB design tools, simulation tools, just all of these digital tools becoming so important to them. But also in looking at the research, there's always, when you look at the bars, this is the career pro bar, and here's the millennial Z bar. And I love looking at where they're so different. One thing that I noticed is that the millennial Zs are just so much more concerned about like compliance, product certifications, and anti-counterfeit assurances, both from the manufacturer and the distributor. Because actually, certification of products was the number one most important factor in a millennial or Z choosing a distributor, but it only ranked 9th for career pros. So again, kind of back to that other question where I'm like, okay, I get it. I see that this is what you're saying, but why? And so I had to do a little bit more research into it and kind of take a look at, when they're coming into the career force. If you look at like when a millennial Z came in, it could be anywhere between like 2010 all the way up to 2025. So thinking about that 15 years there, you look at, there's a massive surge in counterfeit components, supply chain issues, chip shortages. So they have this baseline assumption that if it's not certified, it might not be real. But then the pros just have had decades where like that was not a daily concern for them. That's really only become something more recently. So the millennial and Gen Z are so much more concerned with those certifications, with compliance and cybersecurity than their seasoned counterparts are.
Okay, so making sure that surfaces in obvious places within your website, whereas before it was, yeah, that's a good point about, we didn't have to worry about that. It wasn't a thing back in the days, so to speak. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, everybody knows it's important, but your website is so important. The majority of the buyer journey is done on that website. It's where they're going for that, real content. It's where they're going for their data sheets and all the information that they need. And so if you're, and the tools, they want so many more digital tools now. So if you don't have that on your website, they're going to go find somebody who does.
Yes. And I know Cadina's Part Solutions they've done research over the years that showed if you don't have those CAD models, the likelihood they'll go with somebody else that does. And it was, I forget, it was over 50%. So it was a pretty impressive statistic there. Earlier you said there was a preference towards interactive, and you mentioned webinars as an example. That obviously these other things are interactive as well. I'm curious if what you're seeing in terms of, like, we used to have just long form content, whether that's case studies, long white papers, ebooks. Are you seeing a trend towards webinars or other things that are more interactive versus these long form print things?
I would say yes. So I think the only thing that I have seen that has gotten longer has been LinkedIn posts. I'm looking at social media, I'm like, this is too long, this is too long. And then I go to best practices. I was like, okay, actually, I'm reading more longer LinkedIn posts. Apparently LinkedIn is where it's getting a little bit longer. But everything else, and I think even from your research, the ideal length for a podcast, like my goal is always an hour, but like they are favoring shorter form podcasts. Mm-hmm. And so, what we are seeing with webinars, we do the All About Circuit Summit, which was previously Industry Tech Days. But these webinars, what they're really getting engaged in is the live Q&A. So you know, have your 20, 30, 40 minutes of your webinar. You don't want it to be pitching to them. They hate being pitched to. They want those real solutions. But it's that interactive part. So we just finished up with the summit at the end of October. And I actually counted up all of the questions that were asked. It was almost 300 questions asked.
Wow.
Webinars. And yeah, it was just amazing. It's, you know, there's a lot of people being like, okay, this is great, but I want to know this.
Yeah.
And so getting that opportunity to talk to somebody during that webinar, just not just watching it, that live Q&A part is really, really important to them. They really, you know, are into the interactive and the, I don't want to say relationship building, but the engagement.
Yes. And it's that authenticity, right? Of this is an actual person who has knowledge. We can tap into that knowledge. I see that. It's quite valuable. And, you know, it might take a little coaxing for somebody's subject matter expert that's not entirely comfortable with public speaking, but really just showing some of the benefits of that maybe. And like, you got this, you know, this stuff, you're going to be fine.
And it's how I feel. I'm such a behind the scenes person. So like being on a podcast is a little terrifying for me, but realizing like I'm talking about something that I am so passionate about, that I love, that I know backwards and forwards. So I think once you get somebody talking about something that they love, it's so much easier for them. And then they've got people asking them questions and they're like, oh, that's a great question. I have an answer to that, because they are the subject matter expert.
Yes, yes. Very good. All right. What other key findings? Did we cover them?
I was going to say that's the 5 that I
Okay.
just think were really, really interesting. So, I mean, I can wrap it up with some takeaways. The one that I think is, you know, kind of harsh, but it's a reality. AI is here. So if you're not using it or anything, and I think the keynote kind of touched on this last year, like just start playing with it. You know, start just figuring out what it is and how it works, because it is here to stay. So you either have to kind of hop on the bus or get left behind. Another one is just depth beats polish, which again, I think is really hard for us as marketers. We want everything to look beautiful and, you know, to stay on brand and this sort of thing. But you really do have to help them solve problems, not just understand the product features. They definitely care about performance and reliability and that sort of thing, but they care more about the problem that they're trying to solve.
Yeah. Than the design aesthetic that it's packaged in. Yeah.
Oh yeah, packaging is huge. The other thing is they don't want, they expect those instant self-serve tools. So you've got to give them the CAD models, the dev kits, simulations, reference designs, comparison tools. You've got to do it right on your site. Or like I said, they will go find somebody else who does. Let's see. We kind of touched on this, and I think you kind of touched on this. So your younger engineers, they influence the BOM. They may not have that final sign off, but they are building that short list. So what you're doing really does need to speak to them. They might not be the end decision maker right now, but they will be very, very soon. So you want to, you know, get into where they are right now, get in front of them right now, which feeds into the communities and forums. They just matter more than ever. So if you're not meeting them where they are, like especially in their aha moments, you are completely missing them. And where they go, like to search for things might change, but it doesn't change what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, let's dig in just a smidge on generative search specifically. So, right, I'm just, again, going back to your end of life example, I can imagine this young engineer specifier grabbing the original data sheet for that product and grabbing the specs of what it is they need to test or solve or whatever and throwing that in, and they're using either, you know, large language model to come up with solutions, or they're starting their search on Google, but now you have AI overviews. So no matter which way you come at it, generative search is a big thing that's influencing people. So how do you see engineers using it? What trends are you guys seeing on your end? And what advice do you have to marketers?
Yeah, absolutely. So really interesting. This question actually came up yesterday. Somebody had kind of like reached out to our CS team, and they had said, you know, like, we're kind of struggling with this. Like, we're seeing this decline in site traffic. AI is taking over everything. Like, how what do we do here? And, you know, so I had to come up with like a pretty polished answer for it. But it's mostly, and kind of what I just said of, you know, we're already seeing that AI changes just how they search. but it doesn't change what they're searching for or who they trust. So AI is just, or LLMs, the generative search, whatever we want to call it now, is just kind of that first stop. It's where they're going to get this overview or this quick answer. But that like authoritative engineering source still remains like absolutely essential. And, we definitely have seen and expect that the Google traffic will decline. But, trying to think of it on the other side, the discovery through AI will rise. So the value doesn't disappear, it just shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And, for us, it's hard to say like, oh, we're not worried about that. Obviously, we're all worried about that. But, for us, we're kind of somewhat uniquely insulated because like our properties, all about circuits, control.com, EE Power, all those, they're very expert driven. They're community validated. They're data rich. So AI is pulling from us. They're not replacing us. So I guess for marketers, it's not about losing the reach. It's really about showing up where AI goes to find that information.
That's really well said. I absolutely agree. And, the more you have your brand associated with those topics, not only on your own site, but on trusted third-party sites like EETech's properties, that's the way to go. I mean, that is really the way to win at search with generative. And also in our studies, we're seeing that technical publications have jumped as far as go-to places because they're trusted. And with all of the AI generated content and crap out there, people want content from sources they trust. So y'all built a great thing over there.
Yeah. So you want to be that trusted source in case they're coming directly to you. You want to be that trusted source in case that's where AI is pulling from and that's where they're going. It's really about showing up where they're hanging out.
So for marketers out there that are building their plans for 2026, what are some things you'd suggest they should pivot towards or adjust? Any parting thoughts for them?
Oh, that's such a great question. Let's see. So make sure your website's just up to par. Like, give them what they need. They want tools. Make sure, you've got clean information. You've got updated information. You've got those tools that they're relying on or that they need and want. Making sure that, you're doing good content. Like being that trusted source, being that expert, being something that they can rely on. And start shifting your focus to the millennial Z, where they hang out, what they want, what they need, and helping them solve the real world problems. So we need more engineers. So let's at least make the ones that we have smarter and more well equipped to engineer our future.
Perfect. Well, Terra, where can people connect with you and learn more about EETech and your brands?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of places. I'm on LinkedIn. You can, I don't want the bots to get my email address, but it's Terra Gledhill at EETech.com. But if you want to talk research or want any of the versions of our research, you can reach out to research at EETech.com. We just wrapped up this year's version of the EIR. We like to share it with our clients first so they get a little sneak peek, but we do release it to the public in January. So if you want a copy, you can reach out to us as well. And then there's just EETech.com. It'll take you to all the multiple communities and brands that we represent. And yeah.
Awesome. I'm so excited. Your next report's right around the corner. Can't wait.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.